The Pilsen Alliance is a grassroots organization. Actually, this is our 20th anniversary. In 1998, the organization was born out of a community assembly where people already started discussing the issues of displacement, gentrification, disinvestment in our public schools, and many other issues of concern for the neighbors. And seeing that there's no public officials or organizations that were addressing these important issues, the Pilsen Alliance was born as a community organization, as a nonprofit, with this strong mission to advocate for affordable housing, quality public schools, immigration, police accountability, and many other issues that are critical for or the well-being of our community of Pilsen, and also across the city in collaboration and solidarity with other organizations doing similar work.
Awesome. So I know since 1988, Pilsen Alliance has tirelessly fought for quality education, affordable housing, government accountability, and healthy communities. But never in the 20 years that they have, done these services for the community have they seen something like what they faced earlier on this month. And I want to show a few pictures. One picture, highlighting, the specific event that happened and how the Pilsen Alliance was affected. So as you all can see, it was vandalized. Their front window was destroyed, cracked, but obviously destroyed because they had to get a new window and have it repaired. So can you tell us, a little bit more, about this event and how it affected or did not affect the Pilsen Alliance and Pilsen in general?
Absolutely. I think in the 20 years that we've been in the community, we have never seen something like this. In fact, we have seen in many instances a lot of support, a lot of solidarity from neighbors in the community who understand, the mission of a small grassroots organization to advocate for social justice, for racial equity, and affordability for everyone, good schools for everyone. So I think it was for many a surprise to see this, but if you look at the political climate of all the tensions that not only we see in the community, where the community is really struggling to survive, right, as an iconic working class community, as we see more and more luxury development, no accountability, frustration and anger is building up because I think as a community, many people see, well, we are not making any advances towards a solution. I think we see from the highest level of government in the White House an attack on immigrant communities, an attack on the working class. I really seem and a really almost like a war on the poor that really doesn't seem to get any better, but we see on a day-to-day how it gets worse. We see more luxury development, small businesses closing down. In the past decade or so, 10,000 residents left Pilsen. It's not obviously unique to the Pilsen community. We see displacement affecting the whole Chicagoland area. We see the issues of our schools, the school closings, disinvestment in our community. We just lost a community center. So as people see this with concerns, we hear this narrative on the other side, the mayor's office repeatedly saying how great we're doing, right? From the White House, a similar rhetoric, right, of how well things are. When we see the issues at the grassroots level with a lot of concern, on a daily basis we see more people being evicted. We see on a daily basis more issues in our schools. We got to remember, even in public schools, despite of the commercials that we see now from the mayor's office saying how wonderful the schools are, not too long ago, a few just weeks back, the special education department was given to the state because the city is not trusted anymore of how they follow these guidelines, right? And the complete lack of accountability, where developers literally take over entire communities. They come often out of town from New York, from San Francisco, when perhaps they have exhausted their investments, and now they come to a community of opportunity when this completely disconnected with the reality. We see a community like Pilsen, where the average median income of a family is $34,000 a year, and now we see developers building $800,000 homes, $1 million homes, like now more and more popping up. And that the drastic effect, because it's changed, right? But that has a staggering effect on the livelihood of our community. We see the assessments, the tax assessment system, how disproportionately tax these families, tax low-income residents, it tax the working class, and it subsidizes the developers, the same developers that are getting red carpet treatment by this mayor and local alderman, and no help or little help to low-income residents, families who have been paying taxes for decades, right? How is that fair? How we can talk about equality when we see these systems at place? So this is systematic problems that are really affecting and creating gentrification. Developers who come into the community and do not follow the basic guidelines that we have. In Pilsen, alone we have a mandate of 21% affordable housing mandate for affordable housing to be set aside for any new development. Okay. 21%. We don't see any enforcing of that, but what we see, or any accountability with that regard, what we see is developers finding loopholes where they're paying in lieu fees, where they're paying, these fees that we don't even know where they go. In the 25th ward, I think it's over $3 million that have been paid in fees. So they don't have to set those affordable housing aside, right? So when we don't create affordable housing, where developers are not held accountable, when the city itself is not committed to create more affordable housing, and the mayor is not committed to create more affordable housing. Today we are sitting on $270 million of reserves, when we see more and more people going homeless or losing their homes. I think that it's obvious that people are going to be angry and outraged, right? It's just, what do we do with this anger and upset, and concern, these frustrations, right? And the rhetoric from the White House, the rhetoric from the mayor's office, that everything is going well. We just created 7,000 condos, new condos downtown. Yes, but why don't you talk about the fact that 250,000 Black residents left the city? Why don't we talk about the fact that for third consecutive year, Chicago has lost population? Why don't we talk about the fact that Pilsen has lost 10,000 residents in the last decade, and we see more and more evictions every day? Let's talk about those real issues and what we're going to do about it. Let's just not tell me about, because I don't see any merit on developers coming in and actually want to make more profit. I think that's the norm. I don't see there's any nuance with that. I think that the nuance is how they pay the mayor's office so they can pay those fees that never come back to the community. So that pay-to-play culture also is affecting and creating this massive displacement that is not unique to Pilsen, Humboldt Park, Hyde Park, Kenwood, Oakland. We see like in Uptown, north, west, south, you name it, right? So we need to come out with solutions, and the anger and frustration targeted at different places. I think that needs to be translated into action, but action towards solutions, to hold our public officials accountable, to hold developers accountable, to pass legislation, right? I do think that the frustration and the demonization of groups like the Pilsen Alliance comes from these developers and politicians that see these inconvenient truths as a problem, right? And they create this chaos around and point out the fingers so they don't take responsibility. Right? So when we see people coming to our page and saying, oh, this is because, the Pilsen Alliance hates white people. It's like, when we talk about white supremacy, right? I think that we see many, many groups, and a vast majority of the society condemning what's happening at the White House, right? And what the administration is doing to attack immigrants, to attack the poor, right? I think that there's like a lot of people who agree with that, right? But how the demonization of groups like Pilsen Alliance starts, right? Because the inconvenience truths that we speak, right? When we talk about police accountability, we talk about civilian oversight to create more, safety nets. Because our youth are dying literally, not only to violence, but to police brutality. To me, that's not radical. To me, that's something that, and to the organization,
reality.
Is that reality that we need to address. And when we see this demonization, we know exactly where it's coming from. Obviously, we don't know, we don't want to, and quite frankly, we didn't even ask for the police. We want to ask around for videos in the neighborhood, but we don't want, at this point, but we want to make sure we know that this is touching a nerve, obviously. So we want to continue, so this is not going to intimidate us, but actually encourage us to continue to speak about these truths, to continue to organize in the community so that we find real solutions, right? We talked about rent control as one of them, right? 75% of the people in 25th ward say, yes, we need rent stabilization, right? And this, again, the demonization of saying, no, this is going to hurt the small homeowner, this is going to hurt the community, I think the Real Estate Association, very, fans of Rahm Emanuel and many people in Springfield, right, have said that these are like throwing a grenade in the community, when 75% of the people saying that these rents are out of proportion. And we have a bill, HB 3512, that is actually creating some incentives for small homeowners who live in the community, who have maybe some properties in the community, and they're not greedy, are not trying to generate flipping houses and tripling their rents overnight, right? We want to help maintaining sustainable, thriving communities where small businesses continue to thrive, where residents are not displaced easily. But we got to talk about how these policies that the mayor and the local alderman are creating more segregation in our communities, because as we get displaced, right, our communities change again. So again, we repeat this bad legacy of segregation, that it comes from politicians that are in the pockets of developers and not from or community organizations like Pilsen Alliance, who are trying to create spaces where we can talk about solutions.
Yes. And it sounds like, it reminds me of a term that I learned in college that ties to privilege, the white savior complex. But here it's more like the money savior complex. So it's like these people coming into a community who have no idea, the people. Obviously, they don't see the faces, they don't see the struggles like the Pilsen Alliance does.
Yes.
And they come here and they see, a piece of land. They're like, you know what, we're going to make this place better with money. And disregarding everything, like the policies that you all have and like the actual need the community has. Right. So it's like disheartening to see that, these people who do have the power to, make a change in the community are making a change, but to benefit themselves. And like, it's just like marketing, like advertising. Well, when we bring this corporation in, you're gonna generate money. And a lot of people think money, can fix everything, but it really doesn't.
But literally money cannot create communities, right? Communities are created out of struggle, right? Hunger strikes have created high schools in our community when our schools have been either overcrowded or literally crippling because of infrastructure, right? We have created libraries, train stations, you name it, right? And infrastructure is out of a struggle. So money hasn't created that, or the city hasn't created that. But when this table is served, obviously now developers want to have a big chunk, not a big piece, not a little piece. So I think that and how they come in, right? I wanted to share the example of the developer CityPads, who bought Casa Aztlán, right? A community center where actually Pilsen Alliance used to be, right? These are the same developer that is displacing people in Uptown in a single room occupancy. These are veterans, people with disabilities, the hundred of people, like most vulnerable working class people that were displaced in Uptown. The same developer that bought Casa Aztlán and convert that into a luxury condos. But not only that, when they came into the community, they whitewashed an iconic mural in the community, and in their social media pages, they were promoting making Chicago great again, right? This is how they come into our communities, right? So the rhetoric, right, of the White House is not, just a rhetoric for the Democratic Party or, politicians to say, oh yeah, look how Trump is so bad. Yes, of course, but look at what they're actually doing on the ground. Look at how these developers, let's look at the concrete examples. And then when we see that these people, the hypocrisy of saying, condemning the hatred speech and condemning, the discourse in the White House, but not condemning the actions of the developers that pay for the campaigns. That's a hypocrisy, and I think that has to be condemned, because that's how they treat immigrants. That's how they attack I think the shameful attack on immigrant communities has to be really, if we really have to talk about solidarity and action, has to be reflected in solutions and actions. How we treat our immigrant community in the ground. Are we providing affordable housing? Do our kids have the same opportunities in our public schools? Are we creating enough opportunities for youth programs, for community centers to exist, right? For shelters, for basic needs, mental health clinics. Well, we see that the track record of this Democrat, especially the mayor, who talks about how great he is to the Latino community, the immigrant community, but let's look at the actions, right? How dismantle our entire immigrant community as we see it, right? How our immigrant community is not giving any, how our schools are defunded, right? How school closings, how he closed half the mental health clinics. I think that we look more and more into the policies, right? So we see not only the shameful rhetoric of Trump, but also the actions of the Democratic Party here. And how do we talk about real change? So we want actions to speak louder than words, right? Not only they condemn someone like Trump, but that they condemn the developer that comes in and insults you publicly. Are we holding him accountable to create affordable housing, or are we giving, a red carpet treatment just because, and this developer gave the mayor $10,000 for their campaign. So how can we, and this is during the month of like the month of the arts for Chicago, right? And we raising this historic mural for a community like Pilsen that is really, and I think that how developers use the culture for their advantages. So oftentimes in the websites you see how they say, well, Pilsen is a thriving community, Pilsen is rising, look at the culture, look at the small businesses, be part of this. People love that. But at the same time, how they use the culture and they erase it. How they use the culture and they displace people. Because the culture, the murals, the small restaurants and all this depend on people, right? That's how the people build them. People are essential, fundamental to create and maintain this social fabric. And they are using it for their profits. But when it's not convenient, right? You're marginalized and excluded. So let's talk about in the ground, how can we help our families stay in the neighborhoods? How do we create this balance between helping helping these small businesses exist and, to benefit from the changes, right? So we're never said, okay, we're anti-development, what we're saying is that this is outrageous when all the cards are stacked against the working people, right? And just all the red carpet for the big developers who already got subsidies, who already got, all the money in the world. And how we're helping our small businesses, how we're helping our families stay in their homes, how we're helping our families not to lose their homes, right? And I think those are conversations is where I think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party alike have failed the working class.
Yes. And you say, like an ongoing topic is, the community is not being heard. So can you talk about how, the local politicians and like even the national politicians, how even the president, how they're not aiding these communities who really, or just listening to the community and, again, deciding but not really listening. So what do you want the community, like these politicians to do to help you all and listen to you all?
Absolutely. So, from like how, the president, has almost destabilized the housing urban development agency, HUD, right? How that's destabilized, defunded, right, to benefit developers. And I think like in Chicago we see similar measurements, right? The Chicago Housing Authority is not investing in more affordable housing, but withholding reserves, and developers are definitely taking over entire communities. So their policies, when you start really looking at them, they're really not, neither one of them are actually advocating to protect their families. Also, obviously, differences in terms of the discourse and obviously a shameful attack, on immigrants and, other measures. But the actions, I think here in Chicago fall so short of what is needed, I think in communities like Pilsen, right, we need not only to them to hear us, right? And I think the Pilsen Alliance for 20 years have been saying the same thing. We are being displaced, and we've done actually as a community, and not only the Pilsen Alliance, but obviously many organizations, a great job are, battling coal plants, right? And then Rahm Emanuel goes and takes credit for it, right? But, battling conclaves, creating cleaner environments, advocating for affordable housing, advocating for police accountability. So when we see all these actions that comes at the grassroots, right? And we continue to be ignored even today. But not only that, but I think that the demonization, right, of organizations like Pilsen Alliance, because they have become an inconvenient truth to politicians who choose to ignore local politicians, state politicians, and at the federal level. They all are ignoring the big issues, the structural issues that affect our working class communities. Look at what they've done in immigration. They have the audacity to even negotiate with DACA. Democrats and Republicans were tokenizing immigrants and negotiating that for a wall, not a wall. It's like, that's outrageous. That is a shame on both of them. What they were seeing on the local level, right? To see how police accountability has worked, right? I mean, let's look at the Laquan McDonald case and many other cases of young people being brutalized and criminalized, and we cannot have a civilian oversight because politicians don't agree with that. But I do think that they will be the first ones to take credit for whatever they feel has done any advances. But if you look at really what's happening in our communities, right? especially low-income communities, in the Latinx community, in the Black communities. 250,000 Black residents left, 10,000 residents left in Pilsen, Humboldt Park, and many other communities. What happened is on the schools, not only the 50 schools that were closing, today they want to close more schools in Englewood again. So this is an attack on the working class community that we need to see as, if our politicians obviously are not listening to us because they're listening to their campaign donors, they're listening to the special interest groups, the corporations, the billionaires who own them, right? We need to wake up and see what's happening in our communities because they are dismantling on a daily basis. So we need to come together. We need to see our common ground. Don't fall into this. That's what I think the racial discourse is very beneficial to them, to pitch us against each other. Mm-hmm. But if we really look at this from a working class perspective, we are all immigrants, we like it or not, we're all immigrants, right? We all, I may have an accent, but let's look at everybody, let's look at where our families come from, right? And I think that we have a lot more in common, right? We have to have empathy what's happening, we see communities on the west and the south side being disinvested. If we see the police accountability affecting our young people, when jails have become businesses for young people, so we see more youth centers, after school programs closing down, where more like jails keep expanding. Let's see at the structural problems and let's work together. And that's what we Pilsen Alliance have done. We work in coalition with the groups like the Chicago Housing Initiative, or the Leave the Bank Coalition, or with CPAC, the Chicago Police Accountability Council, right? To find changes that are not radical. I think that these are changes that are necessary if we want to have a sustainable, inclusive, and fair community for everybody. Not only for those communities who are affected brutally right now.
And it takes everyone, not only, yes, the working class, but these developers and the local politicians to, put in their foot and put in their perspectives and just listen.
Absolutely.
That's it. So
Absolutely.
What would you, just, to tie back to the incident, the vandalism that happened to your property, to the property of the Pilsen Alliance, what would you like to tell the people who are responsible for this act?
I think I think that is very. I think it's clear that the inconvenient truth, right? It bothers them. It touches a nerve. I think obviously your advocacy for affordable housing for everybody, right? Our condemnation of white supremacy, not on white people. That's got to be clear. And I think many people condemn that coming from the White House and many other spheres, and why we believe in racial equity, right? That we talk about civilian oversight of the police, right? To make sure that there's accountability at every level of government, that us advocating for affordable housing and quality neighborhood schools for everybody. That's something that is not going to help only the Pilsen community, not only is going to help, like you said, like working class people, it benefits all of us. And I think that nerve that was struck for whatever it was said, it is something that will help all of us. And I think that is what we take. So we're having honest conversations. We have an event on June 6th where we'll continue to, on June 6th, we will continue to talk about preserving communities like Pilsen and how it ties, to this bigger fight, right, of maintaining the social fabric, right, as a working class immigrant community that, I think, especially in times of intolerance, right, and, hatred and all that. I think it's important that we come together to find solutions. So that's what our message is a message of join us. We're only speaking for everybody. What we're saying is join us to have an honest conversation so that, we can live in a society that is fair and a society that is just, that treats people with dignity. And I think that we need everybody, as you said, we need everybody in this conversation. So the demonization, the intimidation, it won't work, because I think that, I think many of us, I think more and more people see the importance of this conversation and the solutions that can help us battle this horrible heritage of segregation, of inequality, of structural racism. And I think by having honest conversations, we will work for a better society for everybody.
Correct. And like you said, the community is not, you can't create a community with money. A community is created through struggle, through the experiences of those who, have been in like the worst and the good. And I think the picture that highlights this is what was the students created like an
Yes.
art and put it like over the
The youth
window.
committee of the Pilsen Alliance created a, as we as we're working towards the replacing the window, they wanted to put it forward like the same message, right? A message of unity, a message of coming together to address the solutions, because we need to be honest to address the structural racism, inequality. We have to be honest. That's the first step. Let's understand that it happens, right? And then we can move forward, right? How we can address them. But dismissing the problem, ignoring the problem, or changing the narrative, it won't work, because we know what's real and what's not.
Correct. And as we see here, the children, they put a banner up saying "Always forward, la lucha sigue," and it just highlights, the importance of, even in times, this is a community. This is how community is built. Again, not with money, but when things happen, we come together and we listen to each other. We listen to our struggles. We listen to the things that we need, and we support one another. And I think that picture just encompasses this whole, everything you have just said, and it ties it into, the vandalism that happened, because, community comes together and we fix things together. And obviously, the window is being fixed with the help of the community as well.
Yes.
So it's just a beautiful thing to see that, these developers aren't even paying attention to. So it sucks that the community has to, face this gentrification and face the rhetoric of, luxury town, when in reality, they live in luxury, but to others it's not luxury enough. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come in here and talk about this issue, because again, like we said, it's not just Pilsen, and unfortunately it's all of Chicago, and a lot of people are migrating because it's just not it's not affordable, it's not safe, and again, there's a lot of factors, but why are we now seeing mass migration? Is it because of our current political state of the president? A lot that goes behind it. So thank you. Is there anything you would like to say to the viewers, or any shout outs, or moving forward?
No, just if you want more information about the Pilsen Alliance, you can go to our website, thepilsenalliance.org. Visit our social media, learn about the struggles of the working people, of the communities that are struggling for displacement. So let's learn more about what we really stands, right, before demonizing, before making our minds. And we'll learn that we have a lot more in common, and that we need everybody's help and participation. So maybe that, if anything, encourage you to participate in the change that we want to see in our community. Like we said, we don't want, we want to make sure that this change is for everybody, right? Not only for a few, but for the many, not the few.
Exactly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please, again, check out the Pilsen Alliance website, and have a great day.
Thank you.